An unquenchable thirst for power, murder for hire, and corporate greed. We're not talking about the U.S. government. Oh, yes, we are. This is House of Cards Season 6. House of Cards is a U.S. political drama, which was actually the first streaming TV series. This is the whole thing that started binge watching. This changed the culture of how we watch television. It is a very important show. Season 6 was written and run by Frank and Deborah Gibson. It was directed by Alex Sokoloff, who's also helming the upcoming Witcher series. Except for the last episode. The last episode was actually directed by Robin Wright. So Robin Wright stars as President Claire Underwood. Michael Kelly plays Doug Stamper, her husband's bagman. Ray Kinnear and Diane Lane play the Shepherds, a family trying to take Claire out of power. So season 6 starts 100 days after Claire has taken power. Her husband has died. That's right, Frank Underwood is dead. So now Claire is on her own trying to figure out this political and corporate landscape as all these people around her either try to get things that they want and need or are trying to take her out of office. So as you guys know, when I talk about TV shows, I give you the good, the bad, and my overall score. That being said, let's start with the good. Robin Wright really knocked it out of the park with the show in more ways than one. First of all, the show was canceled. Netflix killed it. After the whole thing with Kevin Spacey came out, they said no more House of Cards, we can't have him in the lead, so the show's not going to go on. So Robin Wright fought really hard to keep the show going, at least for one last season, so the fans can know what happened, and to save the 2,500 jobs of the people who work on this show. And it worked. Netflix acquiesced and said, okay, we'll do one last season. The second way that she knocked it out of the park for this show was her acting. A lot of people weren't sure if she'd be able to carry this final season on her own without Frank Underwood. And she definitely did. Her acting in this season is award worthy. To be honest, after I saw the trailer and they showed that, Frank Underwood had died and all that kind of stuff, I wasn't sure how the show was going to be. I didn't know if it would be really boring or, if it was going to go full on like Me Too movement or whatever, but they actually found a nice balance. Claire Underwood's character really stepped up, took charge, and it carried the show throughout this whole 8-episode season. That's right, instead of 13 episodes, there were 8. So the show moves along at a brisker pace and it has more packed in there. And the show has a different feel with her in charge. She has a much more no-nonsense delivery. She's very matter of fact, whether it's when she's breaking the fourth wall or when she's dealing with people in the show or with her acting. It was more of like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. You're watching. If you like it, great. If you don't, I don't care. And it works. I really liked when she breaks the fourth wall. It felt a lot different than when Frank Underwood's character used to break the fourth wall. As much as I liked Kevin Spacey's character, I always got a bit annoyed by him because he was so stuck on himself. He was so self-assured, which obviously his character needed to be. He could be really pompous and really annoying, and towards those later seasons, his shtick was really getting long in the tooth, and I was getting a bit tired of it. I know a bunch of people are going to disagree with me in the comments, maybe they're going to dislike it, and that's fine. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. I think it was just a nice change of pace, it was something different, and it wasn't a bad way to end the show. The entire cast puts in a stellar performance. They really want this show to go out with a bang. Everybody in here, from the smallest part to the biggest part, really put in their full effort. They really went all in, and it really shows throughout the entirety of this season. What has been the case for most every season since the beginning, Michael Kelly's Doug Stamper is, to me, the star of the show. He's like the moral center. Is he a moral person? Is he a good person? No. No one on this show is a good person. Everyone on this show is kind of a real piece of and the people who aren't, the people who are good, tend to get So Doug Stamper's character is kind of that middle ground. He's not totally evil. He's not totally good. And Michael Kelly's performance really nails that, and he has a great range this season of emotions and stuff. Everything from this quiet, simmering anger that you really think like, man, he is going to mess somebody up, to really emotional outbursts, and it's kind of different than what his character's done in the past, so it was nice, again, to see that change of pace. I love a good time jump. I love when a show, whether it be mid-season or at the end of a season, goes from one time to another, especially when it's a pretty good chunk of time. The time jump in this season was about 6 months, and it was really cool. You saw what was happening earlier on, and then you saw what the result of all that was. Like I said, I love a good time jump, and this show pulled it off pretty well. The new antagonists for this season were the Shepherd family. I thought they were a really good mirror to Claire's character, because neither one of them are completely good or completely bad. They both have their reasons for doing what they're doing. They both think they're in the right. And that's what a good protagonist-antagonist relationship is. It's kind of two people who are similar, who have similar points of view, but very different ways of achieving that. Well, in this case, they have pretty similar ways of achieving that. It's really put on the forefront of the entire season, where before, everything was kind of behind the scenes. Like this one, it's very in your face. So again, it has a very different feel than the first 5 seasons. A lot of the story arcs that harken back to the first season really do finally get tied off in a nice neat bow. Well, I wouldn't say that they get tied off nicely. I'd say that they get tied off pretty brutally in some cases. They end that story arc with a bang. It was interesting to see a nuanced portrayal of people like in high government and how corporate greed and money and all that kind of stuff has perverted the US government. And it has. That's how the American government is in real life. This season, just like the seasons before, it did not flinch and it did not shy away from that stuff. It really showed you what happens in Washington and how messed it up it is. Really, what the American people need doesn't come first. What the politicians need, what they want to do to line their pocket, is what comes first. And it also shows why the wealthy, the top 1%, and their corporations and companies always invest big into these different politicians' campaigns, because they want a pawn in place to make moves to get things that they need, whether it be legislation or stuff in their favor, or maybe they just have personal views that they want to see acted out in the American government. I just wish that people would pay attention to this type of stuff and realize that this type of thing actually goes on, and it is affecting how us, the American people, are treated, what we receive, for our benefits and all this kind of stuff. It affects everything. There were some genuinely surprising moments throughout the entirety of the season. A bunch of times there were things that I didn't see coming. And that was because there were some pretty great shifts in tone through twists, the characters, their actions, their motivations, and some of them were really big shifts. You might be rooting for one person or the other early on, and then they do something really, really messed up, and you kind of say, wow, that person really is a piece of shit. I don't like that person anymore. I'm not going to root for them. I hope they lose or get killed or whatever that thing may be. As much as I dislike seeing good people get hurt or killed or screwed over by the powers that be, it's very realistic. It is how it is, and it's been that way forever. The first few episodes are kind of all over the place, and you're kind of getting to know the new characters and the motivations of everybody and trying to figure out where Claire's trying to go and trying to figure out why the Shepherds want her out. And that all kind of comes to a head in episode 6. It is just awesome. And a lot of that was because the build up to it, the story arcs and all the characters and everything that happened. A lot of stuff happens in episode 6 that will surprise you and shock you, kind of delight you if you like stuff on the darker side. The cinematography, as always, looks great. David Fincher really laid out the blueprint that this show would follow for its entirety with his episodes that he did in the earlier season. The color grading obviously isn't the same anymore because he really likes those warm and those cool colors to contrast. It's kind of a neutral color palette now, and there's a lot of thought put into these different shots and how they go together. And that leads to some pretty brilliant editing moments throughout the entirety of the season. Some of them are really small, like when Claire is speaking to the American people on TV and then she switches and she's talking to us in the audience. It's very seamless, and a lot of people don't realize those cuts are pretty easy to screw up. Even if they're just a couple frames off, it can really mess up how someone perceives something. It'll look artificial and it'll take you out of the moment like that. Even the dialogue scenes, the conversations in the show tend to be done really well. It's not just shot, reverse shot, but when something important happens, they'll go at a different angle or they'll go close up so that you feel the impact of whatever just happened even further. The music, as always, really added to the atmosphere of the show. It's nice classical music. I love a good classical score. Yes, there are some electronic elements to it sometimes when they're trying to ratchet up the tension and things of that nature. It's so good that one of my friends that works here has the opening song as their ringtone. And when I say that the music adds to the feel of this show, I think that is an apt term because this whole show revolves around the feelings and the expectations of the audience. The main characters are actually talking to you, the audience member. So it's all about how you feel, what you're expecting, and subverting your expectations and your feelings. And whether or not people admit it, this show basically is just a super high-end soap opera because the story structure and the way things pay off during the episodes, at the end of episodes, and how they lead to another thing, it really is just like a soap opera. It's just as sappy and heavy-handed and syrupy, and they just lay it on really thick. This is peak soap opera drama. So if you like soap operas, you're probably going to love this show, even if you're really not too into the political stuff. If you like that whole scheming and conniving and things going on behind the scenes and people going at each other and screwing each other over, this is the show for you. With Frank Underwood's character being gone, I think they filled the void pretty well, or as well as they could have, because he was a big force in the series. I mean, the series was really about him. Yes, Claire was always there, at first as a supporting character, and then kind of as an equal towards the last few seasons. The natural progression, which led to this thing, was already kind of going in that way, but they really kind of got their hand forced when Kevin Spacey was fired because of all the stuff that happened with him. So they did a pretty great job salvaging the wreckage that Kevin Spacey left behind that was the show, and built something different and something functional out of that. And even though Frank was dead, his presence was felt throughout the series. You only see his face one time, and he gets talked about a lot. So even though he is gone, he kind of isn't. One of the things that I like about this show is it shows politicians are shady as and they will do whatever they can to stay in power and to get as much money and influence as they can while they're in office, so that when they get out, they can go and join a think tank or some big corporation. So that's what I thought was good about House of Cards Season 6. Now, let's talk about the bad. This show is a simmering, slow burn, and it's not always cooking on all burners, especially this season. It can get slow at times. There's always something going on, but because there's like this ebb and flow of the different story arcs, it can be spotty. Now, granted, they did cut it down to 8 episodes from 13, so that did help the flow. I think if the season had been 13 episodes long, it definitely would have been a bit of a stinker. But because it was 8 episodes, it wasn't too bad. The actual finale, the ending of the season, the ending of the series is not that good. Yes, it has an emotional impact, but it leaves so many things open. There's so much left open. They don't tell you how certain things end. Yes, you can infer and figure out how many of those things end, but there's a lot of newer stuff that got brought up this season that you are left sitting there like, okay, did she do this? Did these people do this? Did this person die? Did this person live? What the hell happened? I think they were trying to pull a Sopranos, and it did not work. You really got invested in some of these story arcs from season 1 all the way up to now, and some of the new story arcs in this final season. And a lot of them got no payoff. They got no closure. And that's pretty frustrating for a lot of viewers. Now, is this like the last season of Dexter finale? Hell no, nothing is that bad. If they had just added maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes to that final episode, they could have tied off almost everything, showed what happened with Claire, showed what happened with certain other characters, explained what happened in the aftermath of that final thing that happened in the episode, which was kind of big, but they didn't. Leave some things to the viewer's imagination, but not everything. I think Claire Underwood was a great female lead. I love that she had this dark side and sometimes had this nurturing side. Not very often. I think Claire is a horrible person. I think almost every person in this show is a horrible person. This show is just filled with pieces of shit, and you want to see all of them fail because they deserve to. As I was watching this show, a lot of times I just really wished, man, I wish there were some good people on this show. Like good-natured, good-hearted, honest people with integrity. And there are, but of course they always get murdered or screwed over or put in jail or whatever it is. They always get screwed over. And that's kind of frustrating. I know we don't live in a black and white world, but sometimes it's nice to see that. And this show is just gray. Everything is gray. There's no good, there's no bad. Everybody, like I said, is just shit. But going back to the whole female empowerment thing, it didn't really feel organic to me. It felt like a reaction to what happened with Kevin Spacey and the Me Too movement and everything. Now, what happened with the Me Too movement is great. You know, a lot of people were able to speak out and get the help that they deserved, and to see the people who really did some evil stuff pay for their crimes. That needed to happen. But, like I said, it really influenced the hell out of this season. And I don't think the story would have ended quite this way if all those things hadn't ended in the first place. As a matter of fact, Kevin Spacey actually filmed, I guess, 3 episodes. And they closed out his character, and they led to other things that happened in the story. But they decided just to cut them, and I think that's why there were only 8 episodes. And they really kind of like knocking men in this show. Like, most of the most evil people in this show, at least on the periphery, are dudes. Now, granted, white guys have been pretty evil. White guys have screwed over a lot of people throughout history. From the Crusades and beyond, you know what I mean? Even way before the Crusades, white dudes have been murdering and plotting and scheming to get what they want. Sure, I'm a cracker, but I'm not afraid to admit those kind of things. It is what it is. But the thing is, you can't say in the show the end of the middle-aged white man is at hand and that Frank Underwood is dead and I'm never going to talk about him again, but then have the whole season about Frank Underwood and what he did and trying to undo it or trying to uncover what happened. It was the biggest thing aside from Claire's motivations. Like, it was Frank Underwood just as big as before, just not showing his face. If they really wanted to set themselves apart and show that, they really should have kind of pushed the Frank Underwood thing to the side. I've heard more than a few people talk about how they were pissed off because they feel like Claire's character is supposed to be a portrayal of what it would have been like if Hillary had won the election. This is the type of person that Hillary Clinton is. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. I think most politicians are corrupt and they're in it for themselves. And the ones usually who aren't or don't seem to be, at least, like, you know, Bernie Sanders or Wes Clark or Ron Paul, even though they say a lot of things that make sense, they always get forced out by the media and other politicians. I don't buy into this is supposed to be what Hillary would have been like. And some other people were mad because they said, oh, this is just wish fulfillment. They just wanted to see what it'd be like to have a female president. That's been done before. People have seen female presidents in shows and movies and stuff. This was done because it was a continuation of the story that already happened. They had already kind of established what was going to happen in this season with putting Claire into power and saying that's what he wanted in the first place, because then he'd be free to do whatever he wanted to make, you know, the money and to influence things behind the scenes. So again, this was just a natural continuation of that. Was it the best continuation of that? Hell no. Overall, I think the season was pretty good. It wasn't great. I think Robin Wright as Claire Underwood was fantastic. You know, her performance couldn't carry the entire show because there was a lot of stuff with the writing and the way things finished that were kind of clunky and just weren't satisfying at all. So with the good and bad out of the way, what is my score? Drum roll, please. 6 out of 10.